I hit the got it. All right, here we go, Angelo. Welcome, everybody. This is the Fall Line with KS and Company. I'm Dave Capron, and I'm here with my buddy Angelo Ross. And Angelo, I am super excited tonight for this one to get out to our folks. We have Greg Dixon, the coach of the national team for our Telemark crew. He's also, and I don't know, I wanted to ask you, Greg, I know you've had a couple terms before you were the coach, I believe, on the team. And I was hoping you could kind of give us a little bit of your background there, because I know you're also an Alpine clinician in the Northwest Division for PSA. So you're on both the Alpine Ed staff and the tele examinership out there. Could you tell us a little bit just about your Ed staff background out there?
Yeah, certainly. So you said about being on the team 2 terms. So I got on the team in 2016. And at the end of that term, they were putting out applications for coaches for the new teams. And one of the things that happened within that term is that we made the decision to take what was formerly the Nordic team and separate that into a specific telemark team and a specific cross-country team. And so we had an application for a telemark coach, we had an application for a cross-country coach, and then the snowboard and the Alpine actually grew their coaching staff as well. So at the end of the 2016 term, I was able to come on as the coach. And as you all know, that term ended up being a 5-year term because of COVID and the lack of the ability to do tryouts that year. So I was able to spend, I guess, 1.5 years of my first term as the coach, and then just starting this term now, a couple more years as the coach. Yeah.
Cool. So, Angelo, you get to chat with someone on telly from the West, and so I'm going to ask you: are you going to take your telly gear with you, Angelo, when you go to National Academy, or are you too scared?
Well, you better have it.
I'm not scared of nothing. But I wasn't planning to take it only because of the weight limits.
Well, you can ship it ahead of time.
I could buy some out there too.
Oh, there you go.
If Jim Shaw drives out there, he's bringing his fleet of tele gear, so we might see it out there anyways.
I saw Jim last week at Mary Jane, and he is looking forward to it. And we got to get him one of those shirts, because that shirt you're wearing right there, Dave, that's Jim skiing in the Feel Your Face skull.
Absolutely. Yeah, I got the Telepalooza shirt on, the one you designed for the Telepalooza. That went pretty awesome. And who was it? Do you remember? I know you'll remember. Who was it that won the Brahmas?
Oh, I don't know if I know that.
I thought you remembered who that was.
No, but Blizzard was generous to donate a pair of Brahma 88s for that event, and I don't know who won it, but somebody. Okay,
we'll have to look that back up, because I know we announced it on one of the podcasts, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, but I was thinking he was from that area. That's why I thought you might remember. All right. Well, we are here, and as we start all of our podcast, it's probably the most liked question. It's the one that I hear the most feedback on. It. People love this. They really love to hear where our guests first learned how to ski, how old you were. Was it with family? Because we were pretty surprised when we had Mike Hafer on. I figured, Hafer had been born with skis on, and he's like, nope, and skied a little bit, but not big time till his 20s. But how about you, Greg? When did you learn and get it all going skiing?
So let me see about that. I was 7 years old, lived in Western New York, and there's a small ski hill there called Bristol Mountain, kind of near the west side of the Finger Lakes. And my stepfather was the food and beverage manager at this mountain. And so I was actually lucky enough to get a pass there for my youth. And they would stick me in lessons every weekend, and I would try to stay in them as long as I could, but I would often just ski out and do my own thing most of the time. But yeah, so I started skiing when I was 7, but just recreation. I didn't do any racing, didn't do any real formal or intense skiing until I moved out west in 1996.
And were you hooked when you were that 7-year-old? Was it like you were skiing after school? Was it just in the weekends?
Yeah, like I said, they put me in weekend programs every once in a while. And then when I was in high school, we did have after school programs, and I would show up for that a little bit. But that was just way more social than anything. It wasn't, we didn't really learn how to ski any better. We just went out and tried to hurt ourselves in the trees and the big jumps and whatever we could do. So I wasn't really hooked. In fact, it was kind of funny. I remember we were discouraged from skiing. I was on the high school wrestling team, and our coach did not want us out there skiing at all because he was too concerned about injuries and not being able to be at the next meet. So I didn't really ski a ton when I was young at all. And like I said, it wasn't until after college coming to Oregon where I got into ski instruction, and then I took it a little more seriously.
Yeah. So when will we have this wrestling match? Will there be a weight designation and a weight limit? Like, how are we going to figure that out with Hafer?
Well, I bet, he and I are about the same size. I bet we probably wrestled the same in college too. And, it's a funny thing. My staff that I work with here in Oregon at Mount Bachelor, I can name a dozen people that were wrestlers when they were younger. And I think the correlation between wrestling and skiing is that we don't have any ball skills. And so it's just basketball didn't work, soccer didn't work. So we had to try something else.
Angela, did you have any ball skills?
Never.
You were skateboarding, and I let's see. I did play baseball, little league, but I didn't play really much after that. Didn't play in junior high or high school. And all my friends will tell you that I could ski, but I could not play basketball. The foul stuff was like, everything I did was they'd call foul.
Well, so Josh Spolstra, who was on the snowboard and adaptive team, he was a wrestler as well.
Oh, geez, but we're going to have, this is going to be something we got to get going, maybe we can get Craig to come out for Masters and Pro Jam, and then we could have it right there, even if we don't do it at National Academy. That would be cool, because Hafer's usually out here for Masters.
We're going to have to do like fall line Olympics. Don't we still have to race Lipton? And wasn't Eric and Sue Kramer going to like have a race in the hurdles or something like that?
They had some kind of race
throwdown.
Snowboard. It was a snowboard competition race or something they were going to do. Yeah. Kramer kind of, she talked a big game, and we haven't seen anything from Kramer yet. So we'll see if something happens. She's hiding over in Vermont right now. So when did the telemark bug start? Did it start when you were here in New York? Did it start when you went out west?
Yeah, I didn't even know what it was when I was in New York. And it wasn't until I went out west. I was really lucky. My one of my co-instructors and roommates, actually, he was a telemarker, and he was actually on patrol for telemark, and then was a telemark instructor also. And one day he just took me out. We were at our area. We have a Nordic Center right there at Mount Bachelor, and the Nordic Center actually had a whole fleet of rental telegear. And so I just grabbed some of that. He took me out one day, and obviously we didn't warm up or anything. We just went to the top and started doing blues and blacks. Like, oh yeah, you got this figured out. You can manage it. So yeah, that's what I learned. Just following him around, giving me some instruction. And then I loved it. I thought it was great, and said, I don't really need to do this Alpine thing anymore. And pretty much all my free time skiing after that was on telemark skis.
Cool. So when you went west, it wasn't, because you said you really didn't get the teaching bug till you're out there. So what drew you west?
Yeah. So my degree from college is in environmental science. And so my first career out of college was working for the Forest Service. And I got hired in Southern Oregon for a season. And then it was, seasonal work. And so every winter I needed something else to do. And where I first worked in Southern Oregon, there's a small ski area called Mount Ashland. And so my first winter out in Oregon, I just went up to the ski hill, got a job teaching. Didn't know how to teach, didn't know how to ski very well, but thought I'd give it a go. And the rest is history. 24 years later, I'm still here doing this.
That's awesome. I love it. So pretty much following your buddy around and then kind of self-taught through those early years on telly then. Well,
I'm going to say self-taught. What was actually really cool, we were lucky that we had a telemark examiner that was part of our staff at Mount Bachelor. Mm-hmm. And so after I got pretty good, I could actually put some turns together, I started showing up for some PSIA clinics with him. And I remember it's kind of funny, one of the first questions this guy asked me was, what do you really like about telemark skiing? And I said, I think my favorite thing about telemark skiing is carving. And he looks at me and says, I don't think you've ever carved a telemark turn. And so that intrigued me enough that I thought this guy was worth following around for a while. And so I had a pretty good mentor at Mount Bachelor as far as being able to get into the telemark world. So I did have a lot of formal training since then.
Yeah. So were you when you first started teaching, was it on telegear and you were teaching all lessons on telegear, or were you on Alpine and tele a little bit, or?
No, definitely mostly Alpine at first. I'd been teaching Alpine skiing for 2 years before I learned how to telemark at all. And like I said, most of my telemark was just in my free time off the clock. But then when I got good enough, got my level 1 certification, then I started jumping into the rotation of telemark lessons. And we actually had about, probably 15 certified telemark instructors at Mount Bachelor. And so we had a pretty good crew to go along with. And back then we actually did have a daily telemark product. So you might get there actually might be people out there getting telemark lessons on any given day.
So do you have rental gear available at Mount Bachelor now?
Not any longer. Yeah, they had it for several years, and it was probably about 10 years ago that they finally got rid of it, and they just didn't want to upgrade the fleet. And luckily, there has been a shop in town that has carried telemark gear for rentals until recently. So we are actually at the point now where, to the best of my knowledge, there is no shop in town that rents telemark gear, which is kind of crazy since Bend is a town of 100,000 plus people. And we have a lot of outdoor shops, and some of them sell tele gear, but none of them are renting it right now.
Yeah. So what kind of gear did you start on? I think back to what the crew had me on, and it was pretty skinny, and it was leather when I first started.
Yeah. The skis I first skied on were a pair of the Rossignol Wild Widows, I think is what they're called. They had Wild Widows, and the Black Widows were the stiff ones, but Wild Widows, and then some the Belay 3-pins was the first binding. And I was super lucky. I got to start in leather boots, and it was in a solo lace-up boot that had one buckle on it. Yeah. And that was the setup. That was my first year or two of telling was on that equipment.
Oh man, that's cool.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't miss the leather days. I would have been pissed about that.
Yeah, Angelo has missed those days. I think he's been plastic all the way so far, huh?
No, my first couple of times were in leather.
Was it? Oh, cool.
Trying to remember if my first time must have been at Whitegrass. I went. If you've never been to Whitegrass Ski Touring Center in the Canaan Valley of West Virginia, you should put it on your bucket list because it's magic. Great guy named Chip Chase owns and operates that place, but. It was 1996-ish. I was Alpine level 2, and a guy named Dean and I were sent by our ski school director, Jimmy Hafer, down to Whitegrass to go get certified cross country level 1. So when we got there, it was a two-day event. We went through the first day, and we already had the teaching skills to meet that standard. So on the second day, one of the cross country examiners, who was also a tele examiner, I think it was Randy French, but I can't remember exactly, offered to take Dean and me out and teach us how to tele. So Chip gave us leather boots and skis to try it on. That was my first time. It was a disaster. And my second time I was also a disaster. It was probably in the late 90s, but I was at Seven Springs, leather boots. We had this little wooden double chairlift on Wagner Slope, and I rode it to the top. And I think I was by myself with these tele skis on. That's brilliant, right? So I get over to the top of Wagner somehow, and I'm thinking about it, and they're like, okay, I'm going to go. And I put both poles in the ground and pulled, and a fly swatter, flat on my face at the top of Wagner, and learned a hard lesson that day. But I think those might have been leather boots too.
Yeah. I still have my super comps. I don't have the first leather boots I was in. There was more of a pure leather boot, but because those I borrowed. But I do have my super comps, and I don't want to throw them away. They're I want to put them on a shelf someday. They're in the closet right now. Yeah,
those are legendary. You can't get rid of that boot.
No, so I've still got the gaiters on them and everything. So I've got the whole shebang still there. But it was neat because I was on a pair of Karoo Supremes, And I don't know, they might have been, 58 wide or something.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a lot of shape to them. It was crazy. And they took me in the trees first. They had me try about 10 telly turns. They said, yeah, okay, let's go in the woods. And we went in the woods for, at the end of the day for like 2 weeks, we'd put them on at the end of the day, go in the woods and ski. And I did not make many telly turns for 2 weeks. And then they're like, hey, we might need to teach you how to make a telly turn now. But yeah, it was fun. It's just fun just going out ripping in the woods and trying to stand up on narrow, almost cross country gear. And you had mentioned that when you got going, you had the Nordic Center right there. Do you do Nordic skiing also? Some track skate, or did you start then when you started tellying? Or
yeah, I guess when I started tellying, I didn't do much cross country then. But like I said, we have a Nordic Center right there at the same Alpine area. We've got 56 kilometers there, and so I would just jump into it occasionally. But I got a little serious about it because in 2008, when I wanted to try out for the national team, back then it was the Nordic team, and you had to try out on classic skate and telemark equipment. So even if and they asked you to have a level 1 certification in the other discipline. And so you could try out as a telemark specialist or a cross country specialist, but you had to do all of it. So I had to go and get my level 1 certification and train a little bit. And that year when I was training for the tryouts, I would go out every morning and do some skating, do a little bit of classic before I'd go and hit the hill on the other side of the mountain. So I got into it a little more seriously then and got a nice setup. And so I go on a semi-regular basis. My wife is really into the skate skiing, and so we'll go out for some companionship and get out and have fun out there.
That's cool.
But it's definitely not my primary.
Yeah. So can you tell our listeners now kind of the rides? I know you're on Blizzard and the NTN, which most all of us are now. Can you tell the folks a little bit about the gear you ride and maybe your quiver a little bit of the different skis? Because it's always interesting to me if we're riding the same width or different widths and that from east to west.
Yeah, I'm lucky enough that Blizzard helps supply us with equipment, and so I do have a full quiver of everything from the Firebird HRC to the Rustler 10s, and I have telly bindings on most of those. My go-to day-to-day ski is probably the Brahma. I ski that most of the time, especially if I'm doing clinics and exam type stuff. And then for more free ride stuff, this is actually kind of a fun one. I go back and forth between the Bonafide, which is 97 underfoot now, more traditional rocker, and then the Blizzard Rustler 9. And I would argue like that those two skis are, I think, my favorite telly skis I've ever been on. And it depends on if you want to be a little more playful or if you like to be a little more carvy and powerful. The Rustler 9 is super playful. It's rails on the groomers, but is easy to turn and gets off piste and through the chunk really well. And if anyone's out there looking for a telly ski to do it all, Blizzard Rustler 9 is a fun one. And if you like to charge a little harder and want something that sticks to the ground a little bit more, Bonafide is super fun. It is pretty stiff, so you do need some big boots and an active binding. But that thing is awesome as well. And then for the deeper days, I've got the Rustler 10s, and unfortunately, I haven't taken them out more than once this year. We just haven't had a super lucrative year as far as snow goes. And then this is actually kind of fun. I don't think I would normally have put a telly bindings on the Firebirds, which are 76 underfoot recreational slalom type ski. But when we went to Interski in 2019, I knew that the majority of the other nations are going to all be on a race type ski. And so I wanted to make sure I had something where I could at least keep up and match their turns to some extent. So the Firebird is a little bit stiff for telly. It's doable. But what I'm looking forward to now is I got Thunderbirds, the new ones that are mounted Alpine. But next year I'm going to try to get a pair of those with telly bindings. And I think the flex pattern of the Thunderbird is going to be a really good carver for a telly.
I have my Thunderbirds now that I plan on putting telly bindings on. I've been skiing them Alpine, and they do have the rails on them, but I have a buddy that can make a poly plate to fit in there so that we can get the binding on. Yeah. So I'll chat with him. Jeremiah here runs the ProTune shop, and he's mounted a pair already. And the way that plate comes off, it's not completely flat, but yeah, he mills out a poly plate that we can pop on there and keep the flex of the ski going, and then mount right on that. Saying you should be on a Rustler 9 maybe for your telly ski, Angelo.
I'm thinking
that might be your ski.
Yeah, I'm kind of next year between the Rustler 9 and the Brahma 82. I used to have a relationship with Fisher, and it was called the Motive 80, and it was a terrific all mountain ski. And I have that mounted up for telly right now. So I was thinking the Brahma 82 will be real similar, but man, I did an FS1 event 2 weeks ago, and there was a guy on the Rustler 9, and I wished I had it. And I don't. And so I don't know. What do you think, Greg? Like if you could have one of those, the Brahma 82 or the Rustler 9, and you had a skill deficit like I do, what would you recommend?
I would definitely go with the Rustler 9. A little wider platform gives you a little more balance. But what's really cool about the way that ski is designed that's really good for telemark is it's relatively stiff under the foot. It's got a plate there, but then it's a little softer, the tip and tail, and that kind of layup makes it really nice for telemark skiing.
Yeah.
And I've got the Brahma 88, so you can jump wild. You might have that small foot.
I have the small binding.
Yeah.
I have a foot length deficit as well as a skill deficit.
I didn't think of that. I forgot about that. I'm just outside the small. So, oh well.
What's the small? And what does the small go up
20, to? 26.5, I think.
Oh, I can put my boot inside that boot.
No, he's on like a 21. No, what is it? Is it a 23?
23.
It's not a 22. Yeah,
my
23.
Alpine boots are 23. Yeah.
Oh man!
And you guys, 1 second. My wife just came home unexpectedly and doesn't realize I'm on a call. So I'm going to let her know real quick and then shut the door.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't want to just close the door without letting her know that he was on a call.
Right.
Yeah, she doesn't usually make it home till 7, but she got cut. All right.
Wow. So when you're riding the Scarpas, have you been riding them for quite a while with NTN? I think you've said you rode the Scarpas and the Scotts on NTN. Yeah,
I've been on Scott and Scarpa as far as NTN. And so I didn't really start skiing NTN until 2015. I was kind of a holdout for a little bit. And then when we made the team, Scott was a supplier, and they were very happy to get us on boots and worked with them for a season. And then Scarpa had renewed their contract with PSIA. And so we were able to have them supply us. And so now the entire team is all on Scarpa for going forward. And it's actually it's really fun difference. I don't know if you've skied Scott telemark boots before, or what used to be the Garmots. They have a really soft flex under the foot and a really nice sensation. Like you can actually feel the snow, kind of like if you're in leather boots, which is really cool. And they have a pretty high instep. So if you got a big foot, the Scotts fit really nice. The one thing about the Scotts though is they are softer plastic, and the cuff is a little bit lower. So if you like to be really powerful in driving, the Scott may not be your boot. But if you're getting into it, I really think the flex pattern of the Scott boot is a good way to start out. If you're just learning jelly and you need something that flexes really well.
Yeah, and because what are you riding now, Angela? Are you in an older Garmart, or are you in a Scarpa for 75? I couldn't remember. He probably doesn't remember.
It's a Black Diamond push. I didn't know.
Okay, muted. Gotcha. Yeah, Black Diamond. Yeah,
and it's a decent. I think it's decent for where I am and where I've been, but it's a little bit too big.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I always fight that with when I go to my telly boot. I've been riding my telly boot big. In ways up because I still have my Garmin Energies. That was my last 75 that I still have, and I don't think those will have to. I don't think they'll ever rip those away from me, even though I haven't been on them in quite a while. Because I've been definitely riding my crispy NTNs. Because it's an interesting. I was a holdout even longer than you were, Greg. To get that first, it was that crossover. It was to get not just one pair, but to have multiple setups. because I didn't dare go to an event. So for the last year or two that I had an NTN set up, I was going to an event with my other pair of boots, my 75s, and a couple pairs of 75 bindings on some skis in the car just in case. And now I've got more than one pair mounted, which is cool, but it's definitely been interesting. It's a slightly different feel for me personally on the NTN from the cables. And it's been getting used to that. It's not a bad feeling. It's just kind of where my center is and where it flows from foot to foot through the lead chains. I don't know did you notice kind of an evolution as you switched over?
Yeah, certainly. In fact, my first week on NTN, I didn't like it one bit. I actually kind of wanted to get rid of it. The flex pattern was different. The balance point was different, as you noticed. And it just felt to me that what I really noticed is I couldn't get into as long of a telemark stance as I really wanted to. I felt like I was just very tight and wouldn't really pick my heel up off the board very much and wouldn't get a lot of separation. And it was just, I couldn't feel the snow very well. I did like the edging power. That was the real big benefit is edge to edge. It was great. So that was fun, but I didn't feel like I could be as fluid and move as quickly in the NTN as I did in the 75 millimeter. But what I will say is after a week of skiing NTN, I did go back, put my 75 millimeters on, and then I hated those. And they just felt sloppy and floppy. And I was just like, okay, I realize I'm in the right spot. I'm going the right direction, but it just took me a little while to figure that out. But still, to this day, it has changed my stance quite a bit. And I feel like I purposely go out there now and try to lengthen my stance more than I feel like the NTN needs me to have an effective form.
Oh, interesting.
And you hear that in forums all the time. People are always complaining about they try NTN, they don't like it, and the feel is different. And I actually liken it to when I went from leather to plastic, and all of a sudden I couldn't be on the snow anymore, and I couldn't flex really fast, but I had more control. And I feel like that's the same thing going to the NTN. You've got more control, but the sensation is a lot different.
Yeah. And that's what I've been working with. And that's why I was like, okay, this is it. I'm going to jump in because I was borrowing stuff from the team when I'd go to training and ski it for a couple hours, but I wasn't on it to really have that time to feel it. And I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I need to get it. And then that's what I'm going to ride on. And that's what I've been doing. And maybe what I need to do is put my Garments back on my 75 and go out and ski a few runs, and I'll go, okay, I don't want that stuff anymore.
It might take that. Just give it a go.
Because I have been enjoying it. I mean, it did for me. I mean, I don't know if you noticed it, but for me, I think it was more than for most because I've talked to some of the crew about it. It took me a while to break in the new NTN boot for me to get the bells. I have the crispy, and to get the bellows, the bellow to work for me definitely took me, I felt, longer than some of the other crew. I really felt like it was hard to break that in for me. And so they pick on me, just telling me that I was skiing pretty crappy. They couldn't break it in, which might have been true. But have you noticed that I know you've been on the Scarpas and the Scots. Was there a break-in period for you when you get a new boot?
Yeah, definitely. The bells are really stiff out of the box. And honestly, what I'll do, I'll put them on at home and I'll just sit there and work them back and forth. I'll just step into the bellow and crank them down left and right until it breaks in. Because if you go out your first day, you haven't even bent the bellows, and you start skiing, trying to drop your knee, that thing doesn't want to bend right away. And it's stiff as all get out. So you do have to break them in. There is a period for that to happen, and they will get softer and softer every turn that you make. Even a year and just skiing a pair of boots, they feel super soft and floppy. They're not going to feel that way out of the box. And I will say, and I know that Crispies do have a stiffer bellow, and so those things are a lot harder to break in. Scarpers aren't too bad, and the Scots break in real easily.
Yeah. Because mine was, and Rodney definitely teases me, and some of the other gang on there, Jay Nation, Jay's like, he probably tell me he broke his in 10 minutes, but I know Christian can probably get on his and break his in like 10 minutes the way Christian skis. Right. But yeah, it took me quite a while, and it was frustrating because I knew it was, and I did try to do some stuff off snow to get it going, but it was frustrating. And but boy, once it does break in, it's like it was an instant different boot. Once I had the bells break in, it was like I was like, okay, now this is what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, it just takes a little bit of time.
Yeah, it did take some time. So Angela's like, more things that take time, man.
I got time.
Well, you are retired.
I'm not in a rush.
You're not in a rush. Listen to you, man. So you had a really neat article in the 32 Degrees after the last Interski that chatted about some of the other countries and how the other countries, you group some of the countries together, how they ski and where we fit in. I thought that was interesting because I think there's still quite a bit out there when you talk with folks about, you're not telling unless you're wicked low. You're not telling unless you're doing this. You're not telling unless you have a big spread in your lead change. I think here in the US, from my perspective, there's still a lot of folks. It probably was even more, years ago. But can you talk a little bit about the differences you saw in the countries and similarities? Yeah,
certainly. I say the biggest category you could put us all in is that we got North America and you've got Europe. And the Europeans definitely have more of a race carving focus, and even in the tele world. And so a lot of those teams are on the race skis, really stiff boots. Most of them are on Rottefellers actually with stiff cables. And then you've got North America and Australia, New Zealand, US, and Canada. You could put those four countries in as having a more similar style where it's more. We all ski with a little bit more rotary input and more angulation, whereas the Europeans are skiing just edge to edge and no angulation, no counter, no upper and lower body separation. So those are the two big categories if you want to throw in there. But then from that, some of the countries that were there that stood out, the Swiss were phenomenal. They were athletically probably the best skiers that were there. And what I really liked about the Swiss skiers is their versatility. And they came in with the ability to rail race turns, to go off the jumps and do 360s, to slide rails, to do tight, small turns, to ski switch, to do all sorts of different activities. And so they were really playful, and that was really fun to watch. And then there's the German team was probably the most technically oriented team. And they came in with a very, let's say, strict style. They all looked identical, and they all ski just edge to edge. And what's really interesting is they have lots of inclination, almost no angulation whatsoever, and almost no upper body separation. They would just follow their skis left to right. But their precision was awesome. It was super fun to watch. And Finland was there, and Finland had a really fun team. I think the two guys there were actually on the FIS circuit and are racers. And I have this one image. I don't know if you ever saw the video that got posted of the country skiing side by side, but there's this great video of Scotty McGee, who is the former head coach of the national team. And he's a very versatile skier. And then there's one of the Finnish guys who's very race oriented. And Scotty's leading. The Finnish gentleman is trying to sink Scotty, and Scotty's just doing these little short pivoty turns. And the Finnish skier did not adapt to skiing and couldn't link the same radius of turn as Scotty was just because of the technique. It was super fun to watch that. But then at the same time, when you watch the Finnish guys on the demo hill, they were crushing it. In fact, they had the tele guys leading the Alpine guys down the hill, and they were full speed and nobody could catch them. So that was, one of the differences is that the race oriented countries versus the more recreational oriented countries. And, the US and Canada, and even, I guess, again, New Zealand and Australia, we're all we're recreational skiers. We want to ski all sorts of conditions. We want to go ski the trees, the powder, the bumps, and get around everywhere. And the Canadian team brought a really strong team. They had 6 skiers that were all phenomenal. And some came from the east of Canada, some came from the west coast of Canada. And you could see the different styles, and that the West Coast people who were skiing up in British Columbia were just super strong turners. Like they could just steer the ski, get a lot of energy out of it, and could ski all sorts of mixed terrain. It's super fun to watch. And kind of like, us at the East Coast versus the West Coast, you got people on our team now like Keith Rodney who can rail a turn like anybody. And so, depending on the conditions that you're exposed to, you're going to have those different skill sets.
Yeah, because I think here in the East on the team, go ahead, Angela.
I'm curious, Greg, that made me wonder. My experience with tele is much more limited than both of you guys. But like when I see it and I'm involved with it in the States, it's kind of a counterculture gig. It's kind of like almost anti-Alpine. And Alpine, I'll be the first in line saying Alpine skiing in the United States is pretty anal and techie, I think the tide is turning with freestyle and, all that jazz. But do you see the same kind of thing in European countries? Or is tele more mainstream, or is it like it is here, which is kind of counterculture?
Well, so all the teams that we worked with, a lot of them, the reason they're on the team is because they come from a race background. And so what we got to see was that side of it. The Swiss came with a really interesting presentation in that they talked about skier types, and that they talked about the race skier, the freestyle skier, the free ride skier, the backcountry tourer. And so they denoted that in their country, the general public that skis definitely has a wide range of types of skiers. And as instructors, they wanted to notice that and make sure that when you are coaching to a student, that you're really aware of what environment that skier is going to want to be in. And we do the same thing in our country, which is good to note that other countries are seeing that too. But I don't know that it says if it's a counterculture there at all. So it's hard to say. Again, like we really saw the race aspect of it because those were the team members that they sent. And we look at our team. I mean, well, we have Keith on the team now, but before that, well, I guess Scotty was a racer at some point in time too. But the majority of the people that have been on the national team don't come from a race background. We come from just a recreational instructor background.
So
because Angelo, go ahead.
I'm curious then, a little closer to home. Do you see a difference in the culture, the teleculture in the United States from east to west, or is it kind of similar across the country?
I think it's similar, honestly. Yeah, most general public teleskiers are folks that just want to go out there and enjoy the terrain, enjoy the turn. They're not super interested in the rigid Alpine-esque or a very technical side of telemark skiing. And it's always something that I thought is interesting with PSIA in that telemark instruction is not a huge part of PSIA by any means. And I wonder if there's an image that PSIA is very strict, that you have to do things in a very certain form or a certain style. And if you're not doing that, you're not doing it correct. And I wonder if that counterculture of telemark maybe doesn't blend with the idea or the image that they believe PSIA has about telemark instruction. And I feel like more so when I teach telemark, I try to be very aware of what that student wants out of the lesson, rather than what I think is good telemark skiing.
I would just like to add or just put in on top of that. My experience with PSIA, as I went up through the ranks, I felt like that rigidity vaporized. And like, for example, like if I ski with, like I've skied with Jeb Boyd at the last 3 national academies. Jeb is arguably the poster child of PSIA, right? He's the head coach of the teams. And it's so loose. It's good. It's so good. It's really, really good, but it's loose and there's no rigidity to it. As you trickle down through the organization to the locker room level, that's where I find the rigidity. And I think if more people understood that, because I think that's true. I'm going to say I think it's true. I think if more people understood that, I wonder if they'd look at tele differently, because I don't feel like I'm ever confronted with anymore this idea that here's the right way. It's kind of like, what's your goal? What do you want to do? So on and so forth. Just wanted to plug that.
No, I fully agree with that. In fact, like this whole year, I'm working with a bunch of level 2 and 3 cert candidates for Alpine and for tele. And they have this image, the idea that you have to ski like this or else you're just not going to get that certification. And at some point, we do need them to understand some very particular movements and some very specific content. And so maybe it is rigid at those levels where you're getting your 1, your 2, and your 3. But once you move beyond that, you can, once you understand different learning styles and different techniques, you can open it up and you understand that there is more than just an individual technique that's going to allow you to do this sport.
Well, and not to beat a dead horse, but I feel like most PSIA members' experience with PSIA is through the certification process. So if that's your exposure, you're going to think that, because when you go to an exam, you're there to demonstrate that you understand and you can ski or ride this curriculum. So all the exams are is a snapshot, but when you broaden from the exam aspect of what we offer, it is really, really cool and loose, and yeah, I don't know. I don't have a follow-up.
Well, I do, Angelo, because I was going to ask before when I interrupted you there, because this is where you went was kind of what I was thinking was from Seven Springs is a little hotbed, man. There, and I skied with a few of the crew from down there, and they're not all the exact same tele skiers. So what are some of the visuals you see to describe to Greg that is different? Because not all the guys and crew that ski at Seven Springs ski alike on tele.
No, correct. Yeah, and I agree. Seven Springs is a hotbed for tele right now, it's cool though, because if you back up before I would venture to say that Seven Springs on the East Coast anyway is a telemark influencer, because it is a big scene. If you back up before that, so this would be in the 80s and the up to the mid 90s, maybe. Seven Springs was an influencer with bump skiing. So it's always had this kind of freestyle sort of edge. You know what I mean? And we've got the super pipe. So there's very few of those around. And then, so we're a snowboard / freestyle influencer. It's really funny because you're wearing that shirt, Dave, and that is not Groucho Marx. That's Jim Kapp, who's pretty much the godfather of tele skiing in our part of the country, and sadly, lost his battle with ALS a couple of years ago. So that shirt's the tribute. But the guy who sort of took over the helm from Capper is Jay Nation, who was an Alpine level 3 before he got into tele. So Jay was a terrific skier before he became a tele examiner. So he sort of has an Alpine style, and he's been a tele examiner for a long time, but I still think he looks through things through an Alpine lens. And when I work with him and we work with each other to make each other better, I speak to him in Alpine, because that's where our common ground is. That said, we have a new dev teamer, Kurt Burns, who just had a successful dev team trial a week ago up at Stowe. Kurt and Jay ski very differently. Jay's a little bit more rotary oriented, and I think Kurt's a little bit more inclination oriented, both great skiers. And then we've got this army of young kids who do rail slides and shit on tele skis and ski switch, like you were saying, Greg. So you see all these things, and then I'm almost done. When you throw in on top of that, you've got Jay and Kurt and these young kids, Mitch Pfeiffer and these other guys who are just terrific, talented athletes, skiing very intentionally. The other image that we see at Seven Springs is the folks who maybe taught themselves. So the very obvious thing that jumps out differently is that the ski instructors, born and raised in PSIA, change edges before they change their tip lead. And the general public typically changes tip lead and then changes their edges. And that's what we see. We see a whole bunch of stuff.
That's a good lead in, Angelo.
It's a hell of a long one.
Well, it's the long one, but Greg probably has a response. But I was gonna, next, I can't not be here and not ask Greg about lead change. And I mean, that's our signature move on telegear, is our ability to lift the heel and have our lead change go on. So, I mean, I think that's what you were talking about, Angelo, right? Where people are lead changing and when their edges change, depending on our lead change in tele. Yes.
I don't know. Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about.
Yeah. So I did. Yeah. Cause I definitely wanted to ask Greg about that. I mean, because, what he thinks and maybe what the other countries do. I mean, it's interesting because we chat about our lead change every day we're on telly.
Well, this is a good question, because I ski with J Nation, I ski with Christian and some other Easterners. And there was this time, maybe it still exists, I'm not sure, where this idea of the delayed lead change was talked about quite a bit. And the idea being that you want to release, re-engage edges, and then somewhere later in the turn, you're going to switch what puts in the front. And I think did it come from John Tidd, maybe? Does that sound right? Yeah. And to the best of my knowledge, this was put out there as a drill to get people away from using the lead change movement to make a rotary movement. And somewhere it became a form and function, like where this is how you ski. You release, you re-engage, and then you do your telly. You switch your leads. And to me, that was always really strange because I'll watch skiers that do that. And I say, to me, that doesn't allow you to functionally use the ski the way you want to use it. Because the way I look at telemark, the movement and why we use it is that it is a pressure control movement that allows us to balance in between 2 feet. And so the movement in and out of one stance to the other isn't there just to switch leads and be in our stable telemark stance. It's there so we can start to apply and adjust pressure throughout the turn. And so there's one phrase in PSIA that's out there is that edge change and lead change should be simultaneous. So when the lead change happens depends on when you're going to engage your new edges. So if you are a Keith Rodney and you are exchanging edges at turn initiation, then you're also going to switch leads above the fall line at turn initiation. If you are doing some pivoty bump turns and you're not getting on your new set of edges until fall line or just after, then your feet are probably going to pass each other in the fall line. So those two things are tied together. And so that's our hope. That's how I look at telemark, is that we use that movement to create pressure. And the hope is that you can adjust the timing of your feet passing each other based on the performance of the turn that you're looking for.
And that speaks to the idea that PSIA is not rigid.
It does.
Yes.
I would hope. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you get really technical and want to look at our fundamentals, the main lead change fundamental says that we need to adjust this. We need to adjust the timing. We can adjust the size. We can adjust the intensity. And it's all based on what kind of outcome you're looking for. And we want different outcomes. We don't want to ski one turn all the time. We do value diversity and versatility in skiing. And so we need you to be adaptable. And so when you go through our exam processes or our trainings, we will put you through a bunch of activities to see if you can have different timings of your lead change, to see if you can shuffle in different ways. And we're not looking for just one form that fits all turns.
So what are some of the thoughts from Greg on activities I can work on with Angelo for his lead change?
Take up snowboarding.
No, man, I ask because we all have kind of our ways of teaching the first telly turns and teaching that first lead change. And I'm curious. I have not had the opportunity. I want to ski with you. And they were bugging me today. J Nation's like, I can come out, and I know you'll probably be there for the examiner college. He wants me to come out in April. I'm like, yes. They always try to do that to me. It's like, I cannot ski in April or May, man. I just can't do it. My business happens then, and it allows me to ski the rest of the year, but those months I can't. But yeah, what are your thoughts on just like that early person just starting to learn some telly turns, having some difficulty with the pressure management with the lead change? What are some of the things that you do? So
I do have a system that I use, and it was created based on a lot of failure with telemarket lessons. And I would say most of the time when I get a student, they've had some snow sliding experience. They're usually Alpine skiers that are crossing over. They know how to make parallel turns. They know how to get around the hill. And so the tendency as an instructor to be like, well, let's just go to the hill. We'll use your Alpine turns. We'll throw some telemark movements in there. But once you add in that whole extra dimension of lead change, it becomes very difficult to manage your speed, to manage your edges and your steering. And so things start to fall apart. And what I've started doing with folks who have never tellied before is I will work on some flatland stuff with them. and no skis on, and we'll get into the stance and we'll see if we can create stability. Now I'll try to push them over, hit their hands, push them back forward, push them sideways. Is this stable? Let them feel the bending of the bellow by pushing down and trying to break the cup over the toes. Then jump back and forth from one stance to the next. You've done that, flat land, throw some skis on, do the same thing. Once you've done that, play from jumping from stance to stance, play with shuffling feet back and forth. Once you've really experienced the stance and felt some stability and strength with that, okay, now we can go start sliding. And I like to break it up with, hey, we're just gonna do a straight run, super flat terrain. We're gonna stand in one stance and just hold that in motion. You got that down, great. Let's go ahead, straight run. Let's shuffle from stance to stance. We've got a straight run down. Let's go traverse this thing in a stance. Let's traverse in a shuffle. And so the hope is I'm slowly incorporating that telemark movement into the other skill sets before I just throw it into the middle of a turn. Once they've developed some familiarity, are more familiar with it, with the stance, then we start breaking it into the turns and introducing it a little bit. And we have a turn, we have an activity we use in our level 1 certification process. And we actually call it the delayed lead change, but what it is, where through the shaping phase of your turn, your Alpine stance, through the finishing phase and initiation, you're in a tele stance. And so what you're doing is taking the control part of the turn, you're moving telemark out of that. So you're not challenging them too much. But as they get better, that shaping phase where they're in an Alpine stance gets smaller and smaller and smaller to where they just go from one tele to the next. So long story, I like to introduce it slowly in small parts instead of just throwing them out on the hill and say, oh yeah, you got this, let's just tele. Because I found that people struggle a lot and they end up getting into very breaking and abrasive movements if you introduce the tele too soon. And that doesn't allow them for stability, and it doesn't allow them to steer and manage their speed very well. So that's what I found has worked the best when I'm getting people into this for the first time.
You have something, Angela, I knew you were thinking.
No,
I didn't know.
I was thinking about the tele clinics I've had from the guys at home here, and they really, really chop it up into small bits, like Greg was describing. And I think there were a couple points along the way where it was a little bit tedious, but then like looking back, it was like castor oil. It's like, doesn't taste good, but it'll be good for you. And I think that's a pretty good approach, especially with somebody coming from an Alpine background, because we know how to leverage a boot, like I can cheat with my boots, but on my Alpine boots, but yeah, you learn the hard way with tele boots on.
So, some of the worst telemark skiers I've seen are Alpine examiners.
Oh, I like that one. We're gonna have to highlight that one right there.
Did Jay send you a video of me?
I wasn't talking about you. I had somebody else in mind.
Oh man. So I wanted to ask you, because people ask me all the time, and I try to think about it, that I've been telling now for probably, they started getting me going. I mean, I always cross country skied through junior high school, but tele I didn't start till in the early 90s when I was teaching Alpine. So from probably in 93 on, with a lot of different equipment. That do you feel it's gotten easier to learn how to tele for folks with the equipment? In some respects, is it for certain segments more difficult than it was before?
And do you mean access to equipment, or
no, just the actual technique? Just with the quality of equipment we have now versus what we did. Do you feel it's easier to jump on tele gear and start to learn how to do it, or?
I honestly think that it was easier to learn how to be in a telemark stance with leather equipment, stuff that wasn't so rigid, that was soft, and feel your feet a little bit more. That's what I started on, and I felt like I could do telemark turns after a couple of runs, right? And I see folks now who have an NTN set up with a boot that might be new, and they try to get into a telemark stance, and because of the rigidity of the system, and along with the speeds that they're going and their uncertainness about that stance, it takes a long time to actually trust moving into that stance. And because the systems are so rigid right now, any little movement you make has a lot of input on the ski. So any tipping of the boot a little bit, it goes right on edge. As soon as you start to bend that bellow, it really presses the ski down. And that input, the beginner skiers haven't really figured out how to fine tune that to not oversteer or over edge the ski. So that's what I think it's harder because of how active the equipment is. However, once you move beyond that beginner stage of actually feeling comfortable in your stance, then the equipment is easier as far as offers more support. The skis engage the snow way better. I can ski longer now because of NTN. My legs don't get as tired from when I used to be on bindings that didn't support me as much. So I think in the beginning stages, the newer equipment might be more challenging. But as you get to be a more advanced skier, I'd say obviously the equipment allows us to ski a lot better, a lot stronger now.
Yeah. Oh, good. I don't feel like an idiot then, Angelo.
First time for everything, Dave.
Oh, I know. Well, it was. I mean, it has been as especially when I was still on my, even though I was on plastic boots, when I was on my 75 gear, it did seem, especially as NTN first came out, it was difficult to get people into the tele stance. And then as I got on the NTN gear, 5 years ago myself, I tried it before then, but didn't have it. I needed to get my own stuff 4 or 5 years ago. I said, it's finally time. Plus one out of the 20 of us here in the East, and there's I don't know, there's probably 15 on NTN, and like 5 of us holding on. It was probably time to switch. But yeah, it's definitely challenging. And that's, I like your description of that, because it is, the equipment is rigid. So it's hard to hold that stance when you first start playing with it, where there's more freedom almost with the lighter equipment to hold the tele stance. But then as speed picks up and that kind of stuff, it is a lot nicer in the NTN stuff. Yeah.
I almost wish that more people would learn on leather boots.
Yeah.
Start from there so you can get the feeling, and then say, all right, you've got that stance, you've got that mobility. Okay, let's put you in some plastic, the next step. But
yeah. And as you mentioned earlier, you were asking me if my question related to availability of equipment. It's like, it's so challenging. Like I still have some of my gear from my 75 stuff, but I mean, I always had extra gear around. I had tons of skis, and I'd be able to put together a pair of skis with a cable on it for someone to jump on. And now I'm starting to get more of my NTN stuff around, but it seems like a lot of the crew doesn't have as much gear to get people on. Do you think has it been harder even for yourself to see getting people on tele gear?
Yeah, indeed. It is. The NTN isn't as adjustable. You could build cable stuff. It was easy to, some of them were large and small. You had to have a certain size boot and cable. But the NTN, I've got a small foot, and so I have a small binding. And anyone who wants to ski the skis that are my size has a large foot. So I can never loan my skis out to anybody and have them try them because the binding size is wrong. And there are, people in our area don't come up to take telemark lessons because there's no gear for them to rent to try it out. And so that's, I think, the biggest barrier in getting more people into the sport is just a lack of equipment. And yeah, a lot of people don't have multiple pairs of NTN bindings and skis just hanging out. It's too expensive, and maybe it's just new enough. The old skis, it was easy. You had a collection of them, and you just hung on to them forever, anyways. And so you just throw them at somebody. It's like, yeah, try these out. Yeah, but that is becoming more and more rare.
Yeah, definitely. So as we move towards the end of the hour here, I have to ask you. We're going towards Levi, Finland. There was just some stuff on Facebook. Jeb, I know, was over there for some of the early stuff. Now, I guess some of the planning for next year for the Interski. I haven't seen any photos of anyone else. I don't know if just the coach got to go. It must have been just Jeb, Angelo. Jeb's the only one they could pay to send.
Pete Allison and Dave Scholing were there.
Were they? Okay. So Jeb just didn't have
heavy hitters.
Okay. I haven't seen it from those guys. So it's like, I'm like, man, what did Jeb do? He's the only guy that went. I don't know. But is there some thoughts or some direction the team's going, or is it all secret? You can't let us know yet? Or
well, I can give you a broad scope for sure. You know, our hope is when we go to Interski, we're always trying to present the newer content that our organization is working on. And when we went in 2019, on the telemark side of things, our telemark fundamentals were brand new. And so that's what we came in with, is how we use our fundamentals to describe skiing. And the Alpiners had used that 4 years before. And so they were on to the people skills concept. And the fact that we want to start assessing people skills. And now that we're trying to be very unified and consistent across the disciplines and have a very similar message. And so our hope is we're going to go in with the utilization of the people skills and how we are looking at them to allow us to develop as better teachers and better technical skiers. Not just, hey, we have people skills, we can assess this, but how can you use quality people skills within your lesson to really develop better communicators and how to develop your skiers more technically because of the process that you're going through within your lessons. And I know we're looking a lot at how do we use two-way communication? How do we collaborate more in our lessons? And how is that going to get us the outcomes that we want in our instructors and our students?
Cool.
That's all you get.
Angela smiling.
I'm laughing.
You're laughing.
I have a question, Greg.
I know you do.
If you went if you were to go in the Wayback Machine and you were coming up through the certification ranks as a guy who Alpines and Tellies, are you the type of guy who, like in an exam year, would you stay on one type of equipment during your exam year, or would you get on both to like have more breadth of experience? Like drill deep or go broader and wider?
If I was going through an exam process and I was at that level in my progression, I would stick to one piece of equipment to get more familiar with that. Yeah, whenever I'm doing a tryout or an exam, I want to be really familiar with the equipment that I'm on. But I'll say for my own personal skill development, I like to go back and forth on a daily basis. It allows me to stay more fluid, I guess, where I feel like going back and forth, I don't get set in any one way or one turn. I feel like I can remain more versatile and not get stuck. And I think that helps me a lot at this level. But in the certification level, I think you need to be more familiar with a piece of equipment. And I would tell someone to stick with that until they got the certification they want and then branch out. I will say this straight up though, my telemark skiing has helped my Alpine skiing a ton in my career. I think I'm stronger. I've got better balance. I can be more adjustable because of my telemark skiing. And if I didn't have that, I think my Alpine might actually suffer it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I've always felt my teleskiing has helped my Alpine. Yeah. Definitely the versatility, the stuff we did off piste, just my balance. I mean, especially when I was on leather boots and even when we went to plastic still in 75 bindings, I mean, you definitely had to balance through the body. And when I got back on the Alpine gear, it's like, oh my God, this is like easy compared to what I was just on in the bumps and that kind of stuff.
You snowboard, Greg?
I do. Yeah. I have a level 1 and I taught. I haven't been on a board in a while, but I have taught for 15 years on a snowboard.
How do you feel like that influenced your telly or your Alpine skiing?
That's a really good question. I don't know that it influenced. Here's what I'll tell you. I think being a good telly skier has allowed me to carve better on my snowboard. There is some similarities in the stance, and I can lay it over pretty good on a toe side. And I think that has to do with my comfort level on tellies and having that split stance. I'll go with that. But I'm a crappy heel sider for whatever reason.
Yeah. I think the way having discipline certs helped me was understand how the equipment works and think in terms of equipment. We're very body oriented in this organization. We talk about knees and ankles and things like that, but I hear anyway, people talk about equipment less. But when you get out on different types of equipment, in my experience, it made it easier to talk about, moving from edge to edge and talking in a gear centric way as opposed to a body centric way. But I think, and any gear you get on other than your primary discipline makes you better in one way or another. Either technically makes you better balance wise or whatever, or teaching helps you understand that we're all rolling over a base. Like that's what some of us are rolling over one base and more of us are rolling over two bases, but it sort of refines that idea and puts it in a crucible. I think makes you a better coach.
I would totally agree with that. And I actually, at our mountain, I love building trainings that are cross discipline where it doesn't matter what you're on. Mm-hmm. And at the tryouts this past year in Breckenridge, we had a really awesome teaching segment where we combined the telemark skiers with the adaptive skiers or adaptive candidates. And on adaptive, they had snowboarders, sit skiers, and alpiners. And then we had telemarkers in there as well. And it was really awesome to see these candidates being able to teach across the disciplines and be able to have content that reached everybody. And it was actually the best part of any tryout I've ever been in, was watching those teaching segments. It was really cool.
So next year, Angelo, I actually got the email from Mickey Stone. We're hoping to have, we got Rodney here skiing with us, but we're hoping to have, Jim's come out, but we have not seen Greg come out. So Mickey Stone was talking about, do we want to have some of the national crew come out? And I'm like, yes. I just got that email. It was either yesterday or today. Mickey was sending out just because we were chatting about finishing the year to the team and next year. And he's like, so he didn't mention which ones, but definitely about the team. And so I'm like, yeah, I want all you guys to come. I think it'd be great to come out to, we haven't had tele training here in the East the last 2 years. We've had partial Alpine this year. But tele was canceled that day when I was almost there. Don Sensitive and I got to ski together, but everyone was canceled like that night when we were heading over there. So yeah, but hopefully next year we'd love to have you come out and tele with us, man. That's one thing I look forward to every year. And it's been a bummer because that's when I get to go with all the crew, and I haven't skied with Jay and since before COVID, Jay Nation or most any of the crew. So
I would love to participate. I was just waiting for my invite. It sounds like that was it.
Yeah, I'm telling Mickey, yeah, definitely need to come out.
Funny story. Jim Shaw and I actually went to the same college and skied the same ski area in Greek Peak, New York, when we were in college.
Yeah, and we do it close, Angelo, to the if the Telepaloozas are on the same time. We were supposed to have tele training that Wednesday, Thursday, before the Palooza on the weekend. So wouldn't that be cool? I
got a place for you guys to stay.
There we go. Angelo's buggy's like, what did you say to me? It was when you said, I said something about next year and you said something about actions. It wasn't just actions speak louder than words. What the heck wasn't something? I got to have my ass there.
Yeah, you can keep talking about it until we see your ass down here. Doesn't mean anything.
That's what I think that's pretty much how you put it. But it's great. I have to ask you, because I've talked to Joe Sipe about it. I didn't know until we started talking with Joe Moore this past year or so that he's a big tele skier. Have you tellied with Joe?
No, I have not tellied with Joe, but he does love to show up. Well, that's not true. I have seen him make some turns. He showed up at one of our trainings and he was in his leather boots, straight skis, and just shredding it down the hill. Just couldn't even tell that he wasn't on modern equipment. So we did make a couple turns. That's it. He loves to bring out the retro stuff. It's pretty amazing what he can do on that.
Yeah, he was telling us that's what he likes to bring out. So that's pretty cool. But that's awesome. And we're going to put the invite right now because I did not get through everything. I would love to talk to you about technique and just some different things on thoughts you have and bumps on telegear. And I do want to ask one thing before we cruise is what is it about Tele? People ask me that question. Like for me, like what is it that I like about it and why I do it? Why some days do I have more fun than Alpine? And I'm curious, what your answer to that is.
I think there's a few reasons, honestly, and I actually like the challenge. It is harder. It takes more balance. It takes more thought, and I like having to put a little extra effort into it. And on the other side, this is probably the reason why most people like it is there is a different flow to Telemark that is somewhat harder to find in Alpine, and just having that range of motion and a little bit of freedom of movement. You feel like you can flow with terrain a little bit more. And I think that sensation is what I really, really like about it.
Yeah, there's a dance when I feel my lead change working, no matter whether I'm in the bumps or wherever, that I don't get the same feel in my Alpine gear. It's like powerful in the Alpine, but there's a and not necessarily a smoothness when I'm rolling down the hill, but there's a flow. When you get the lead change in those short turns going, and there's definitely a rhythm and flow that's like different that I enjoy. I can't really describe it well than the sensation I have.
Yeah, Telemark bumps are one of my favorite. Like spring corn, Telemark bumps, soft and flowy, and the Telemark just allows you to roll over terrain and absorb terrain really well. And it's a fun move.
But yeah, we definitely I know I want to have you back at some point here as we move towards next winter. Maybe it'll be something in the fall that we can chat about stuff and how people can get on the Tele gear to start their season and chat about that you're coming out to training with us.
That'd be great. I'm in. Put it on my calendar now.
Yeah. What are you thinking, Angela? Any follow-up things
Why should somebody who's only been on Teles learn to Alpine or snowboard?
Why should they?
Yeah.
There's no reason to.
I love it.
That's
there
a
you
wrap.
go. Oh, man. Greg, thanks so much for doing this. And it's awesome to have you on. And I am dying to go tele skiing with you. And I know the boys, when they listen, Jay, and I hope you can make some turns with Christian. I have not skied with Christian in quite a while, and he is fun to tele with. He's just fun on skis, and he gets you excited, man. The energy when you ski with Christian, I feel.
Totally agree. Yeah, I love skiing with that guy.
Yeah,
I want to put a shout out to two of our guys, Mike Mayer and Paul Kochi, who we didn't mention. We did mention Kurt Burns just made the Eastern Tele Dev team. We had two guys at that same event who were successful at Tele Level 3, Mike Mayer and Paul Kochi. And it's just awesome to see people shooting for it, man. It makes our little area so much more diverse and enriched. And I just wanted to put a plug in for those guys.
Yeah. And we got to thank our sponsors. I mean, Blizzard Technica for helping us out this year, making everything work and getting us skis to ski on and letting us talk about it and have some fun out there. And also Nick's Boot Fitting over in at Mount Snow. Nick's big dude and helping us out, getting our boots fixed. And you need your boots worked on, go visit him and George over at Mount Snow. But Greg, thanks a lot. And we definitely want to chat again and get on snow. I know Angela would probably love to tele with you.
I would love to tele with Angela. I can't wait for it.
Well,
you better be there.
I'm going to see you in 3 weeks. Maybe I'll take you.
There you go. There, he can ride with you in 3 weeks, man. He'll be ready to roll.
You're
awesome. Well, thanks everybody. This has been the Fall Line with Chaos and Company. We have had Greg Dixon tonight, the coach of the National Tele Team.